I tried to tell you and I tried to warn you, and this especially goes out to Chicago Bears fans. I tried to tell you and I tried to warn you, but you didn't want to listen. You wanted to buy into the BS. You wanted to believe the propaganda. You listened too closely to the Chicago sports media and all the talking points that the Bears organization was putting out. Well, it's safe to say that we could pretty much come to this conclusion that after 7 games of the 2014 NFL season, I was right, and so many of you were fucking wrong. The Chicago Bears are exactly who I said they were going to be, an up and down mediocre football team that had no chance in hell of making the playoffs this season and had very little chance of being a 500 football team. So far, I'm right, and you were just flat out so wrong. I get very little sensation of enjoyment out of it though, because this is a bad football team, or at least, I guess, at their best, a mediocre football team, and then a frustrating football team to watch. And this is a team that on the surface, on paper, looks like it should be so much more. But of course, just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean it actually looks good when it comes time to have the actual application happen on the football field. So it begs the question, why do the 2014 Chicago Bears suck? Well, there's several reasons. Now, first, I could go to my favorite punching bag, Jay Cutler. To any of you that have ever tried to make the excuses for Cutler, to any of you that tried to justify the Aaron Rodgers type of contract to a guy that can never beat Aaron Rodgers, I hope you're fucking ashamed of yourself. I hope you realize just how stupid you truly are. Jay Cutler once again has established once again that he is not even a franchise NFL quarterback once again. Couldn't figure that out after 5 years somehow. So now we needed 6 seasons, and we're going to get probably 2 more of them to find out what we already freaking know. The closest thing to a modern day Jeff George that we have. The ironic thing is, though, is that from a statistical standpoint, his 6th season in Chicago has been Cutler's best season in Chicago. I mean, technically, this is the best he's ever played as a Chicago Bears starting quarterback. How sad that truly is that what he's done so far this year is the best that you've gotten. That is sad. But even with that being said, from a statistical standpoint, him perhaps being better than he ever has been, and at times looking more comfortable as a quarterback than he ever has been, he's still the same old fucking Cutler. He's a guy that makes terrible decisions. He's a guy that fails to consistently go through his progressions. He has a horrible habit of staring down receivers, not being able to get more people involved in the game. He doesn't really elevate the play of others around him. And the Chicago Bears are a direct reflection of their quarterback, perhaps as much as any team in the National Football League. Jay Cutler is one of those really inconsistent guys. He's very up and then he's very down, just like the damn football team around him is. 1 week they're up, 1 week they're down. They are a total and complete reflection of their quarterback. And at a time where this Bears team, in theory, is supposed to be better than 3 and 4, the lack of leadership coming from the quarterback position is glaring and striking. And in particular, when you look at this offense that so many people tried to sit there and say was going to be so goddamn star-spangled awesome and perhaps even the best, most explosive offense in all of the National Football League, you were talking about an offense that had a 2 game stretch where they scored a combined 3 points in the second half, and they're coming off of a game against Miami at Soldier Field this past Sunday, another home game, another home loss, where they managed to score a whopping 14 points. This is an offense that finished tied for second in the league in points scored last year, that now at this point in time has failed to score 30 points even once through 7 games. This offense, like I said, has been up and down. It very rarely, if ever, has shown a consistent rhythm. Now, Cutler's to blame for that, but he's not the only person to blame. Another popular punching bag, more so for other Bears fans, is defensive coordinator Mel Tucker. And look, I personally never liked the hire of Mel Tucker. It underwhelmed me. I think he's a little bit in over his head. I think that when you look at his defense and you look at the team that he coaches, you could sit there and say, what's their identity? What's their goal? What are they trying to do? And that is a direct reflection of the coaching led by Mel Tucker on the defensive side of the ball. And this Bears defense has improved some, but they're still not very good. In fact, they're still pretty much doo-doo. And Mel Tucker deserves some blame for that. but he doesn't deserve all the blame. I look at a head coach like Mark Trestman. Hey, when your team had bigger expectations and you start out 3-4, the head coach is going to get some blame. And Trestman deserves some blame. This is a guy that has stood behind Jay Cutler when he clearly needed to find a way out and go to a different quarterback for the long term. This is a Mark Trestman that was supposed to be this offensive guru. And again, through 7 games, the Chicago Bears offense has failed to score 30 points even one single time. This is also a Mark Trestman who seems to consistently fail to properly adjust coming out of halftime, which leads to the performances in the second half like we saw against Green Bay and against Carolina. It's not just a reflection of Cutler, it's also a reflection of the coaching or lack thereof and the lack of leadership in particular from Mark Trestman. This is the same Mark Trestman that spent several years coaching in the CFL for the Montreal Alouettes. Maybe there's a reason he wasn't in the NFL anymore. Maybe there was a reason that nobody ever gave him a head coaching job. I mean, you have to look at this and you say the Bears fired Lovie Smith after 2012, a 10-6 season. And now under Mark Trestman, they went 8-8 and they followed that up with a 3-4 start to 2014. Yeah, you can start to blame the head coach. He's the one that signed off on Mel Tucker coming in. He's the one that sits there and continues to stand by Jay Cutler. This is the one that is supposed to be the ultimate leader of this team and set the tone and set the pace for this team. And far too often with these Mark Trestman-led Chicago Bears, they just look disinterested. They look like they lack fire, they lack passion, they lack the desire to do whatever it takes to win for the team. You know, it looks like a very selfish team and a very uninterested, unmotivated team. But I don't think he deserves all the blame. You look at the veteran stars who aren't producing. You know, Lance Briggs, when he's played, has sucked this year. This is his last year in Chicago. You know, Peanut Tillman, he got hurt, but it wasn't that great before that, and now he's out for the rest of the year. You look at Jared Allen, a big money free agent signing, bust. Lamar Houston, big money free agent signing, so far, bust. I mean, those are some, big veteran stars that you're paying a lot of money to that you were getting pretty much absolutely nothing out of. That's not a good thing. These guys are supposed to be stars. These are supposed to be the leaders of your defense, a defense that was supposed to allegedly be a whole lot better in 2014. Now, when those veteran stars don't produce, you have to look at them because these are not young players or underachievers. These are guys that have Pro Bowls or all pro teams and all of these accolades and so on and so forth. You really blame a Mel Tucker or Mark Trestman for a Jared Allen sucking or a Lance Briggs sucking or a DJ Williams sucking or a Lamar Houston sucking? No, I don't think so. I think it's incumbent upon those veteran players to actually play up to the name and contract of which they have. But I also think that that's not totally the problem. You look at the lack of locker room leadership and chemistry. This is a Bears team when you think about it. Where is the leadership coming from? It's most certainly not coming from Mark Trestman. It reflects on the field with this team. It's most certainly not coming from Jay Cutler. Nobody is ever going to accuse him of being a great leader. And I don't care what any of the idiots in that Bears locker room try to tell you. Cutler is not a fucking leader, and you can see it. It shows. The only thing he is the player that is kind of like the litmus test in a way for the Bears. When he wants it, the team plays well. And sadly, more often than not, when he isn't really interested and he really doesn't want it, then the team follows suit. So I guess if you want to say he's a leader in that way, maybe he is. But that ain't good. Or you just look at some of the other personalities in general on this team. And you've got a locker room with a selfish player. I love him to death, but Matt Forte has a selfish streak to him. Brandon Marshall, he's kind of, out there sometimes. Martellus Bennett is definitely out there sometimes. You've got immature 26-year-olds like Kyle Long that like to sit there and pick fights with fans. And, it's just, there's a real lack of locker room leadership and a real lack of chemistry on this team that is very troubling. But I think there's one primary problem with this team. And I think there is one primary source or person to blame as to why the 2014 Chicago Bears suck. All the people that want to sit there and hit on Cutler as their punching bag, knock yourself out. I like to do that too, but he's not the primary one to blame. He's a big part of the problem, but he's not the sole problem. He's not even the biggest part of the problem. Neither is Mel Tucker, neither is Mark Trestman. If you think that one of those three people are the biggest problem with the Chicago Bears, then you shouldn't talk football because you are a fucking moron. The biggest problem is the person that gave Jay Cutler Aaron Rodgers money for a guy that can't beat Aaron Rodgers, a guy who hired Mel Tucker, a guy who hired Mark Trestman, a guy who brought in veteran stars that aren't producing, a guy that assembled a team in large part that has trouble with locker room leadership and chemistry, and that is, of course, Chicago Bears general manager Phil Emery. You could imagine my complete and total surprise a couple of years ago when I saw an article somewhere that mentioned that Phil Emery was the prototype NFL general manager of the future. This just shows you that just because people write about football, it doesn't mean they have a fucking clue. In no way, shape, or form is Phil Emery the prototype for anything other than being a general manager that's going to get fired in the next 2 to 3 years because he's in over his head and completely, totally incompetent. Who's the one that fired Lovie Smith off of a 10-6 season? Now, granted, I was okay with that at the time. But if you're going to make that move coming off of a 10-6 season, you can't sit there and replace him with the guy that has an overall losing record. Who's the guy that just had to go to the CFL? He said, Bruce Arians wants to do his own thing. I really don't want him. So instead, I'll go to my not first choice and I'll go bring in Mark Trestman from the fucking CFL. That was Phil Emery. And again, who's the one that hired Mel Tucker? Who's the one that re-signed Jay Cutler? Who's the one that largely constructed this team when you think about it? You look at the draft. You look at the complete and total failure that was Emery's first draft in 2012 outside of Alshon Jeffrey. Remember Brandon Harden and Evan Rodriguez? That's right, you really don't. Shane McClellan, you remember just how bad of a bust he's been. You look at that 2013 class, guys like Jonathan Bostic in the second round. And then you look at the first round, and you're looking at Kyle Long. People say, well, he made the Pro Bowl last year. Yeah, but he wasn't even the best rookie right guard in the NFC North, let alone in the NFC. That honor was Larry Warford of the Detroit Lions. Period. And the Chicago Bears took a 25-year-old offensive tackle, flipped him inside to the least valuable offensive line position in football at right guard, a 25-year-old who had about 4 starts in college. So just stupid on so many different levels where they could have taken another player at that position for less money at a later round and be younger in the case of Warford. He was 3 years younger, 4 years younger, I believe, actually, than Kyle Long. Phil Emery really hasn't done that well in the draft, especially in 2012 and 2013. And it's those failures in those first 2 drafts that really start to show themselves in 2014 and will do so again in 2015. When you start to look at teams and you say, when are they going to be good or when are they going to be bad? You look at the drafts from 2 to 4 years before. That's when you can really start to get an indication of, hey, these guys are good, these guys are good, these guys are good. This team is going to be pretty good even if you don't think they are. Or this draft class was terrible, so on and so on. This team is going to suck. They're going to go downhill. But it's not just the draft where Phil Emery has largely failed. You look at free agency. Big money to guys like Jared Allen and Lamar Houston to get very little to, in Lamar Houston's case, absolutely zero production. A guy that decided to make a big splash in free agency at the biggest weakness, arguably, on that defense, the safety position, by going after guys like Ryan Mundy and MD Jennings. If you think Ryan Mundy and MD Jennings were in any way going to solve your problems at safety, and if you actually believe that Chris Conte deserves to be an NFL starting free safety, you have just shown how completely and totally incompetent you are as a general manager. Ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is there is one person to blame, one primary problem with the Chicago Bears, and one reason solely, in my opinion, why the 2014 Chicago Bears suck. And that is general manager Phil Emery. Bad free agent moves, period. Bad drafts. A failure to bring in the right type of leadership into a locker room that desperately needs it, especially because you've got that noodle-brained quarterback Jay Cutler. Never mind the fact this is the guy that hired Mel Tucker and Mark Trestman. He's the guy that gave Jay Cutler big-time franchise quarterback money to a guy that's not a franchise quarterback, nor will he ever be, no matter how many idiots try to tell you otherwise. The Bears are who I said they were going to be. I'm not letting them off the hook, damn it. Thank you, Denny Screen, for that all-time classic. If you want somebody to blame for the 2014 Chicago Bears and what has transpired, look in the right place. Blame the general manager. Because all of the suck that has happened so far this year points directly back to his ass. Period.